I used to think the loudest sound in our neighborhood was the morning sprinklers kicking on. I never imagined it would be a gunshot. And I never imagined that the bullet would land in my 12-year-old daughter's chest. Because of a wheelchair ramp. A ramp. One child. One woman who thought her HOA title gave her power over human dignity. But the moment Rachel fell, blood soaking through her favorite shirt, eyes wide with fear, I knew this wasn't just about ramps or regulations. This was war. A war between cruelty and compassion, between a child's right to exist and a neighbor's obsession with aesthetics. And what Karen didn't know was that the man she tried to silence, he was the sheriff. This is the story of how my daughter's innocence turned into a courtroom reckoning. How a quiet neighborhood got shaken awake. And how one girl's courage became the spark that rewrote the rules. Stick with me, because this isn't just a story about justice. It's a story about what happens when you finally say, enough. The ramp that lit the fire, when Ada meets Ada. You wouldn't think a piece of aluminum could spark a war. But in Sandstone Grove, it wasn't the HOA fees or lawn height that triggered the neighborhood's downfall. It was my daughter's wheelchair ramp. Just a 6-foot incline, lightweight, portable, ADA compliant, nothing fancy, just enough for Rachel to roll over the curb safely and reach the sidewalk like any other kid. She was born with cerebral palsy, and every time she zipped down that ramp, she wore this massive, goofy grin. You'd think she just landed the final move in a gymnastics floor routine. And I won't lie, seeing that smile, it made me feel like I was doing something right. But apparently, that ramp didn't fit the aesthetic. Karen, our HOA president and full-time tyrant, in a blazer, left the first note folded under our doormat. In neat, angry cursive she wrote, "Ramp must be removed, violates visual uniformity." Visual uniformity? My kid's access to the outside world was now considered a design flaw? I laughed at first. I genuinely thought it was a misunderstanding. So I called her, left a voicemail. Friendly tone, explained ADA laws, mentioned Rachel's condition, even offered to send over the specs of the ramp. The next morning, there was a second note. Second warning, non-compliance will result in formal citation and fines. That's when I stopped laughing. I tried to stay calm, for Rachel's sake, but inside, I was boiling. My daughter was finally finding her freedom, and Karen saw it as a code violation. By the way, if stories like this make your blood boil too, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment to share your thoughts, and hit that subscribe button for more true stories that challenge power with heart. You're part of this community now. Let's grow it. Anyway, back to the ramp. What started as a tool for independence became a target for punishment. Neighbors started noticing the tension. Some offered quiet support, others kept their heads down. Nobody wanted to end up on Karen's radar. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down, not this time, not when it came to Rachel. And as I'd soon learned, Karen wasn't backing down either. Next up, she stops being passive-aggressive and walks right up to my 12-year-old with a smirk and a tape measure in hand. The tyranny of appearances, inside Karen's war on inclusion. Let me tell you something about Karen Langford. She didn't just enforce the HOA guidelines, she weaponized them. To most folks, an HOA is just there to keep the lawns mowed and the mailboxes matching. You know, basic suburban peacekeeping. But to Karen, it was her throne. And every bush trimmed too wide, every welcome mat too colorful, every bird feeder placed 2 inches off center was an act of rebellion. And our little wheelchair ramp? In her mind, that was treason. The confrontation started 2 days after her second letter. I was out front with Rachel. She'd just come back from physical therapy and was maneuvering up and down the ramp like a pro. Then I saw the beige sedan pull up. Karen stepped out wearing that pastel blouse she always wore like armor and marched straight toward our driveway. In one hand, clipboard. In the other, a tape measure. I kid you not, a tape measure. "Mr. Daniels," she said, voice tight as a jar lid, This ramp exceeds acceptable visual dimensions. It's disrupting curb uniformity. I blinked. It's 6 feet long and collapsible. It's allowed under ADA. She cut me off. This neighborhood prides itself on visual cohesion. I swear, I could feel Rachel's eyes rolling from her chair. I told Karen again that the ramp wasn't optional. It wasn't a decoration. It was how my daughter accessed her home. Karen's lip curled like I'd just dragged mud through her foyer. Your child's medical equipment, she said, shouldn't interfere with community aesthetics. There it was, the phrase I'll never forget. My child's mobility was now labeled aesthetic interference. That moment, I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about power. Karen saw our presence as messy, uncontrollable, human, and she didn't like it. The thing about tyrants, though, they don't always need armies. Sometimes all they need is a clipboard, a title, and a crowd too polite to push back. But I wasn't going to be polite anymore. Because every time Karen scribbled a new citation, she wasn't just targeting a ramp, she was chipping away at a 12-year-old's dignity. Rachel stopped smiling as much. She asked me why the neighborhood didn't like her, and I had no good answer. Because how do you explain ableism, wrapped in beige linen, and HOA jargon? That's when I started documenting everything. The letters, the photos, the witnesses. Because I had a feeling. Karen wasn't done, and I was right. Because next came the graffiti. A red spray-painted message that would change everything. The father, the sheriff, and the line he wouldn't cross. You ever stare at your badge and wonder what kind of man you are without it? That night I did. I'd just finished scrubbing the red spray paint off the sidewalk. Cripples not welcome. Those words still burned behind my eyes. Rachel was in the living room, watching reruns of I Love Lucy with a blanket pulled to her chin like it could protect her from the ugliness outside. I didn't have the heart to tell her I hadn't removed all the paint. Some stains don't come out easy. And that's when I sat down with my old lockbox. Inside it, the badge. County Sheriff, District 14. I'd earned it fair, campaigned fair, won fair. But I never bragged. Never flashed it at the barbecue or dropped it at the HOA meetings. Heck, most folks didn't even know. Because I believed in being a neighbor before being an officer. But now my neighbor had declared war on my daughter. And I was stuck between two oaths. One to uphold the law, and one to protect my kid, no matter what. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at that badge, running my thumb over its edge. I thought about confronting Karen with it, slapping it down on her porch like a reverse Uno card. But deep down I knew. It couldn't be about me. Because if I used that badge to fight back now, I'd become exactly what Karen thought she was, untouchable. And justice, real justice doesn't work that way. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I waited. I waited for a bigger mistake, for something that crossed that final line. I reported the graffiti, documented every threat, photographed every letter. I filed it all, quietly. I wanted a clean case, not a power play. And then, the trigger was pulled. My little girl bleeding in my arms. And that was the line. So if you're watching this and thinking, why didn't you use your power sooner? It's because I believed in something stronger than titles. I believed in patience, in people, in due process. But when Karen pulled that trigger, I stopped being just a neighbor. I became the law. And what came next? That's when the hunt began. Hate on the sidewalk, when words bleed into violence. It started with a notice. Then came the letters. Then, the sidewalk. I remember the moment I saw it. A Saturday morning, cool air, coffee in one hand, Rachel's laugh floating in from the kitchen. And then I stepped outside. 4 words. Sprayed in red. Jagged, uneven. Cripples not welcome. Right there, on the concrete where Rachel practiced her wheelchair turns, where she once spun in joy because she could finally go outside without help. I dropped the mug. It shattered on the porch, just like my sense of safety. For a minute, I couldn't breathe. Rage and nausea slammed into me like a wave. I didn't even realize I'd sunk to my knees until I felt the grit of the sidewalk press into my jeans. Rachel came to the door, and I turned too slow. She saw it. Her face crumpled. Not dramatic, not loud, just this quiet folding inward, like someone had reached into her chest and flicked the light off. She didn't say a word, just turned and wheeled back inside. That moment, it was worse than the bullet, because bullets you can dig out. But shame like that burrows deep. I scrubbed it clean, took photos first, filed a report with the local PD, sent a copy to the HOA board. Only one member responded, said they'd look into it. No apology, no outrage, no emergency meeting. And Karen, she doubled down, said I damaged their sidewalk with my improper chemicals. Ironic, isn't it? The woman who ignored hate speech was suddenly concerned about paint discoloration. Neighbors whispered now. Some offered silent nods. A few baked cookies and left them on our doorstep like sympathy could sugarcoat cruelty. But nobody stood up. Nobody said her name out loud. Because the truth was spreading that if Karen didn't like you, you might be next. I realized something then. Words aren't harmless. Threats aren't idle. Hate isn't abstract. When you let it fester, when you let it stain sidewalks and hearts without scrubbing it out from the root, it grows teeth. And eventually it fires a gun. Next up, Part 5, Manhunt in the Garden Suburb, How We Took Karen Down. Because enough was enough. And this sheriff wasn't scrubbing blood off the sidewalk ever again. The gun, the blood, and the moment. Everything changed. It happened faster than fear could catch up. 1 second, Rachel was wheeling ahead of me, grinning at the tulips in full bloom near the community garden, her little gloved hands pressing confidently against the rims. The next, screeching tires, a black SUV, and Karen storming out like a villain late for her own downfall. Her eyes locked on Rachel. No HOA clipboard this time. No smug letter. Just a gun, small, metallic, shiny in the sun. At first, I thought it was fate, a scare tactic, another twisted attempt at intimidation. But then the barrel lifted, and the world slowed. "Don't you people get it?" Karen hissed. "I warned you." Then, bang. Just one shot. The crack echoed through the quiet streets like thunder had misplaced its storm. Rachel gasped. Her body jerked once, then slumped forward in her chair. My legs moved before my brain did. I caught her before she hit the ground, one arm around her waist, the other already soaked in warm, sticky blood. I heard myself screaming raw and high and nothing like me. Neighbors peeked through blinds. One woman opened her door, saw, reeked, then closed it again. Karen just stood there, staring, gun still in hand, blinking like even she didn't expect the bullet to do what bullets are designed to do. Rachel looked up at me, her lips pale. "Dad," she whispered, "it hurts." That single phrase, simple, fragile, broke me. I pressed against her wound, shouted for help again, dialed 911 with trembling fingers, gave a shaky description of a fleeing black SUV, and swore under my breath that I would find Karen if it was the last thing I did. But right then, there was only one mission. Keep Rachel breathing. As the ambulance wailed down the street, as the paramedics shouted code words I didn't understand, as my daughter was rushed away into a metal box of tubes and hope, I stood there. Blood on my hands, fire in my chest, and one truth burning brighter than any badge I'd ever worn. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant anymore. She was a criminal. Next, Part 6. The man behind the badge. When a father becomes the sheriff. Because this time, I wasn't just filing a report. I was the law. And she had no idea what was coming. Sheriff mode. When justice becomes personal. They say you should never take your work home with you. Well, Karen didn't leave me much of a choice. The moment that ambulance pulled away with Rachel inside, I stood there shaking, half from rage, half from the sheer wrongness of everything that just happened. And that's when it clicked. No more hoping she'd stop. No more HOA emails. No more polite discussions. She shot my daughter. She crossed the line. So I walked into my house, still covered in blood, and opened the lockbox I hadn't touched since election night. Inside was a badge with weight, and not just physical. Authority, reach, resources, and a whole department ready to move when I said go. You see, I'm not just Rachel's dad. I'm the elected sheriff of County District 9. Karen had no clue, she just went to war with the wrong neighbor. I got on the phone with my undersheriff. Someone just shot my daughter, I said, voice cold. There was a pause. Then, where is she now? Hospital. In surgery. And the shooter? Fled in a black SUV. HOA president. Name's Karen Avenzo. The line went quiet. Then, we're on it. Within the hour, I had patrol cars sweeping the nearby counties. APBs filed, a flyer with her face in every precinct that owed me a favor, which, lucky for us, was a lot. And yet, I hesitated. Not out of doubt, out of discipline. Because I knew if I personally stepped into that arrest, it wouldn't be as a sheriff. It'd be as a father with a grudge and a fist that might land too hard. But after 3 nights of watching Rachel breathe through gauze and monitors, I gave in. When the call came, we think she's at a motel near County Line 12. I grabbed my uniform, kissed Rachel's forehead and said, I'll be back soon. And she won't ever come near you again. Flash forward, motel parking lot, unmarked units, silent radios. Karen's SUV parked outside room 3B like nothing happened. I stayed in the back, let my deputies lead. They knocked. Karen tried to bolt, but she wasn't fast. The moment I stepped into view, her whole face changed. You? She hissed. Her voice cracked, half disbelief, half hate. You shot my daughter, I said calmly, and now you answer to the law. We cuffed her. No yelling, no pushing, just steel and silence. And that was the moment she realized. She didn't just pick the wrong family. She picked the wrong sheriff. Next, Part 7. Trial by fire. When the community faces the mirror. Because putting her behind bars was only half the story. The other half? What came after? When the whole neighborhood had to answer for staying quiet. The trial that put a community on trial. You'd think the hard part ended when the cuffs clicked shut. But no, that was just the intermission. The real reckoning, the one that peeled back the glossy paint of Sandstone Grove, came weeks later, in a courtroom with beige walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, and neighbors who suddenly remembered how to whisper again. Karen walked in wearing orange. Not her usual pumpkin-colored sweater. I mean an inmate jumpsuit, wrinkled, dull, and about 5 shades too loud for someone who once fined a neighbor for mismatched shutters. She avoided my eyes, but not Rachel's. My daughter sat beside me, thin but healing, shoulders back, chin up, eyes calm. She didn't flinch, she didn't cry. She simply watched the woman who tried to erase her, with the quiet power of someone who refused to disappear. The prosecution didn't hold back. They laid it all out, every threatening letter, every email, every photo of graffiti, the bullet extracted from Rachel's chest, and then they called witnesses. Neighbor after neighbor stood up, and some with shaking hands, some with tears. A few, God bless them, even admitted they knew Karen was dangerous, but kept quiet to avoid drama. I wanted to stand and shout, "You avoided drama! My daughter got a bullet!" But I didn't. Because the jury was already listening, hard. Karen's defense attorney tried everything short of interpretive dance. She was stressed. She feared for the community's integrity. She didn't mean to hit the child. And the piece de resistance? She thought the wheelchair was a symbol of rebellion. I nearly choked on my coffee. But Rachel squeezed my hand. "Don't," she whispered. "Let them dig their own hole." And dig they did. When the detective testified, recalling Karen's motel rant about undesirable residents and keeping the neighborhood pure, even the bailiff looked uncomfortable. The courtroom grew colder by the hour, not just because of what Karen did, but because of what we all let her do. See, this wasn't just about a ramp or a wheelchair. It was about silence. Every time someone saw her bully a neighbor and looked away. Every time someone laughed off her nastiness as just how she is. Every board member who signed her complaints without reading the fine print. This trial wasn't just Karen on the stand. It was Sandstone Grove itself. And by the end, when the jury came back, guilty on all counts, and Karen screamed that she was saving the community, no one clapped. No one booed. They just sat there, processing what it meant to be complicit. Coming up next, Part 8, From Ramp to Resolution. The day everything changed for good. Because justice didn't end in that courtroom. It started something better, something lasting. And maybe, just maybe, something beautiful. They say change starts with a single step. Ours started with a wheel roll. Not dramatic, not loud, just the soft squeak of rubber on sidewalk. It came a week after the trial. The morning air was crisp, still carrying the scent of late spring. And Rachel, my brave, bullet-scarred daughter, gripped the wheels of her chair and rolled out the front door like she was going to conquer the world. Honestly, she already had. Neighbors waved. One even handed her a smoothie. Another offered fresh muffins. A man who once voted against ramps asked if she'd like help planting flowers around hers. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching the slow miracle of human decency return. The HOA board, now under entirely new leadership, called for an open community meeting. No gavel, no podium, no power plays, just folding chairs on the green belt and a whiteboard titled Better Together. They'd passed what they called Rachel's Clause, a new bylaw requiring full ADA compliance in all future HOA policies and providing grants for residents who needed accessibility improvements. Rachel? She smiled and said she'd help design the brochures. The same ramp that once triggered vandalism now had a fresh coat of paint, soft blue, and 2 tiny flower beds flanking either side. Local kids helped build a miniature sign that read, "Freedom starts here." And it does. It starts when people stop tolerating cruelty disguised as order. When they stop thinking a title like HOA president gives you the right to police someone's life. When a girl in a wheelchair refuses to lower her head. And when a sheriff remembers that justice isn't always about badges or courtrooms, but about making sure a child can simply exist without fear. If you've ever felt powerless in your own community, if you've ever stayed silent because it was easier, let Rachel's story remind you. It only takes one voice, one stand, one ramp to shift everything. And hey, if this story moved you, even a little, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. Drop a comment and let me know what's one small thing you'd fight to protect in your neighborhood. As for me, I'm still the sheriff, still the dad, but now I'm also the guy who sits beside his daughter in a folding chair at every HOA meeting, taking notes, cracking jokes, and making sure no one forgets why that ramp was built in the first place. Because justice isn't just served in court. Sometimes it rolls quietly down a driveway and blossoms. The end. But the message lives on.